Hi, I'm Federico Fernandez. I'm a senior fellow with the Austrian Economic Center. Thank you for joining us in this 2021 Free Market Roadshow event. As you probably know, the Free Market Roadshow is the biggest libertarian event in the world. In pre-pandemic times, we used to tour more than 40 cities across Europe, the Caucasus, and Israel. We really hope that next year, in 2022, we'll be able to go back to normal, the real normality, and be able to do that again as well. And speaking of going back to normal, by the end of this year, by the end of 2021, we want to have our Austrian Economics Conference that the Austrian Economic Center and Fundación Internacional Bases organize. We want to have it in Vienna in person, completely offline. So if you want to know more and support this project, go to austrianconference.org and you'll find all the information there. I hope we can all meet in Vienna by the end of the year and this nightmare is finally over. In any case, today's session has to do with the lessons we have forgotten after 1989. And if we take a look at contemporary Europe, there are certainly some memory issues, we could say. Just mentioning the handling of the coronavirus pandemic and the vaccination now, we can see the tragedy of centralization, which Europe seems to have forgotten and is again committing the same mistake. Another bad example is the current government of Spain, which at least has some parts which are clearly neo-communists. But if we want to talk about, let's say, common European problems, which have been repeating themselves for a long time, particularly after 1989, huge public spending, bureaucracy and red tape, and taxation. Europe is known for being a high tax destination continent, which makes many of its countries and its regions highly uncompetitive. For all these problems, we could hold a symposium probably, or a 4-day, 5-day conference and not solving them. But in any case, and because I think we need to be optimistic, I would like to talk not of the problems, but of the solutions. And I think in Europe there is an in-house solution for many of these problems. There is a country within the European Union, by the way, that has liberated basically its private sector, that has created a huge space for the individual, for entrepreneurs to decide what they want to do, that has a pro-innovation and a pro-business environment, and has taken to the extreme, probably, Adam Smith's advice of easy taxes. If you have not guessed, this country is Estonia. Estonia is a small country by the Baltic Sea. It has a population of less than 1.5 million inhabitants. A little bit of its history, because I think it's relevant for what I want to tell you today. In 1939, the infamous Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact was signed. Ribbentrop and Molotov were the foreign ministers of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. And thanks to this atrocity, in 1940, the Soviet Union invaded and annexed the Baltic states. Not only Estonia, but Lithuania and Latvia as well. By 1989, the year that we are discussing and we would like to remember, things were happily changing in Estonia. Something marvelous happened, by the way, that year, which was the so-called Baltic Chain, in which more than 2 million people held hands, 2 million individuals held hands by the roads from Estonia to Lithuania, going through Latvia. Why? Because they wanted to denounce the official narrative by the Soviet puppet government, which was that the Baltic states have voluntarily joined the Soviet Union. Not only that, in Estonia in particular, something else was going on, which is known as the Singing Revolution, in which Thousands of people gathered in public places, squares, churches, to sing patriotic songs and to defy the government and the current state. Finally, in 1991, Estonia regained its independence. There was not much else to regain, though. Inflation was 1,000%. There was basically no currency in the country, no viable currency at least. Unemployment was above 40%. To give you an idea of how catastrophic the decline of the economic years under the Soviet Union, by 1939, the Estonian and the Finnish economy per capita were basically the same. However, by the end of the 80s, the Finns were 7 times richer per capita than the Estonians. In 1992, things began to change to Estonia, and when we talk about the changes there's a name that we definitely have to mention, and that is the name of Mart Laar. Mart Laar was a young historian. He was only 32 when he got to the government and was named Prime Minister. It's very funny that he claims that by that time he had only read one book about economics. Luckily, it was a good book, it seems. The book was Free to Choose by Friedman. He says that he liked what he read and he encouraged his administration to just do what the book said. Lars was very much inspired by the Polish example, what has been going on in Poland, and the reforms led by Leszek Balcerowicz and the so-called shock therapy. And they went full speed in reforms, not delaying and trying to apply reforms in all fronts. What did they do? Well, firstly, and very importantly, they reestablished the rule of law and the system of private property and property rights. They took very seriously the fight against corruption, to the point that they probably have eradicated corruption from Estonia by now. They opened the country to trade. They privatized most of the economy, and they instituted a system of flat tax. I think Estonia is a superb example of what courageous reforms can generate, and in what follows, and for lack of time, I will focus on 2 aspects of the Estonian experience. One is the digitalization of the public sector, and the other one is their tax system. Let's start with e-government. The concept of e-government essentially is the use of IT in the provision of public services. We are in 2021. By now, probably all countries in the world, all jurisdictions, use some sort of IT in order to provide services. But what is the important lesson that comes from Estonia? The distinction that makes the Estonian example so bright, as I see it, is that they have used technology not within the framework of what already existed in the bureaucracy area, let's say, of the country, but to dramatically and radically change these structures and to simplify them. As Martin Kevats puts it, who is the chief digital advisor of the government, in order to create a human-centric governance. I know that scenarios like the ones shown at series like Black Mirror, the Netflix series, are probably far in time. But it is true, on the other hand, that things that are currently happening in countries like China go definitely in that direction. That is not, let's say, the government that I am advocating or that Estonia has implemented. And that is why it's so important, and that's why I took some time to tell you very briefly what happened in the past. That is why it's so important to take into consideration the reforms and the spirit, the libertarian spirit that provided the firm foundations of the Estonian reforms. Without that, you can't really understand what happened there and why it happened and what were the final goals, the end game of everything that has happened there. And also understanding that allows us not to fall to the trap of believing in some sort of technological redemption. Technology alone is not going to solve problems, and the good things that have happened in Estonia are not due to technology X, Y, or Z. Technology is just a tool, a very sophisticated tool, in this case digitalization of the public sector. But the important thing is how and why you use it. Think of a hammer. I can use a hammer on a nail, which is great, or I can use a hammer to break someone's head. The technology is the same. The important thing is why I am using it and how I am using it. So, what has Estonia achieved with all these dramatic changes and digitalization of the public sector? Well, according to official sources, 99% of bureaucratic and procedures and public services can be accessed fully online, fully digital. This means that, according again to official sources, a digital service is a fully end-to-end digital service. This means that no visit to a public office is needed, no paper trail whatsoever, and not even phone calls are needed to get these services. What is the result? Well, for instance, and I think this is quite telling, yearly the Estonians save 844 years in time that they would have devoted to bureaucracy and red tape. Let's think that a year has 8,760 hours, so the Estonians, the entrepreneurs, businessmen, workers, and people students, and everybody who has any interaction with the public administration are saving 7.4 million hours every year that would have been wasted in the altar of bureaucracy, and now they can use to create business plans, to go on holidays, to spend more time with their family, or whatever they want to do. Just to give you another very good example of the miracles that they have achieved, they claim that just by being able to sign documents digitally, they save 2% of GDP. Let's think of this to understand the magnitude of this. Poland and Austria's economies are approximately, their GDP is approximately $500 billion. This would mean that each of these countries would save 10 billion euros every year. Let's suppose if we are a little bit less optimistic, they could save just 1%, it would be 5 billion euros every year in each country, which is really a significant number. An Estonian citizen, in order to change his or her address, needs less than 2 minutes, thanks to the digital ID that they have. And this is the cherry on top of the cake, let's say. Estonia has the world record in time for business creation. According to official sources, you need only 18 minutes to create a company. And I always say according to official sources because I can, let's say, quote and refer this number of minutes, but I believe it's probably less than that. In any case, the 18-minute mark is a world record. As a consequence of all this digitalization and simplification of bureaucracy, the Estonians have created a little bit more than 5 years ago a program called e-residency. In a nutshell, and I don't have much time, but in a nutshell, what e-residency does is to grant non-Estonian citizens all the economic rights that an Estonian citizen has. And these rights can be exercised remotely from wherever you are in the world. This is a magnificent program, and it has been imitated by some countries and probably is going to create more examples like it in the near future. Before I finish, I want to come back to the problem of taxes and what kind of tax system we should aspire to have. I think in many European countries and in many other countries in the world, but particularly in European countries, there's a lack of sustainable and transparent tax systems. And by this, what I mean? By sustainable, I think that a sustainable tax system is an affordable tax system. When rates are too high, when you really cannot start a business or a company or a new economic adventure, so to speak, because taxes are so high, that's an unsustainable system. And by transparent, it's an easy system, to comply with. When you need an army of lawyers and accountants to be able to pay your taxes and to know exactly what you have to pay, again, that's a problem. When these conditions are not met, what you have is an unsustainable, opaque, and in the end, unfair system. Poland, for instance, is a good example of a Kafkian tax administration. Probably not, the taxes are not that high in that country, but they are quite difficult to comply with. And France is a good example of brutal taxation for companies and individuals. How a sustainable and transparent system should be? Well, let's talk about, for instance, taxation for companies. I believe that a sustainable and transparent system for companies regarding taxes should mean that whatever profits are kept in the company account, or they are reinvested, or they are used to cover for expenses that are justifiable and related to the company function and business, they should not be taxed. In this way, what we are doing is clearly having a system that is pro-business creation and pro-growth in the country. Why? Because entrepreneurs who are always dealing with failure, we have to remember that starting a company in a huge percentage means that you're going to fail, but at least they have to take care of that risk, but they don't have to take care of paying taxes when they haven't made any profit. At least with a system like this, they can focus on just covering whatever expenses that they have at the beginning, but they don't have to pay the state in order to exist only. When these taxes should be paid? Well, eventually when dividends are paid to the owners of the companies, where salaries are paid, etc. And when these taxes are eventually paid, the rate should be low and should be fixed. What I mean is basically a flat tax system. Let's say 15%, 20%, a very easy and very simple system that everyone knows how to comply and when, and there are no obscure or difficult situations to deal with. By the way, with a flat tax system, whoever makes more money pays more. Unfortunately, there's this very silly criticism of the flat tax system in favor of the so-called progressive taxation that says that who makes more should pay more. Well, in a flat tax system, if I make 1 million and someone else makes 100,000, this other person will pay 20,000 and I would pay 200,000. So it's, you don't need to have a PhD in mathematics to understand that. But you are not penalizing who has started from low and is improving. You are not putting an extra hurdle in their growth, let's say. Is what I am describing a tax haven? this can only be found in a remote island in the middle of the ocean. No, again, this, what I have very briefly described, is the tax system of Estonia, a European country which is a member of the European Union and is a member of the OECD, by the way. And speaking of the OECD, according to the Tax Foundation, Estonia has had for the last 7 years the most competitive tax system within the OECD. So, to wrap up, and again, thanking you for your attention and thanking you for being part of the 2021 Free Market Roadshow. While many countries have forgotten the lessons of 1989, Estonia definitely hasn't. Estonia is the country that remembers. Estonia's system of digitalization of public services, of e-government, of e-residency, and their tax system should become a beacon for reforms, for courageous reforms, in the rest of Europe and in the rest of the world. Thank you very much for your attention.